Coming into the Maynooth University Library Special Collections and Archives reading room to view the Teresa Deevy materials yourself is well worth the effort. But if you are unable to do so or would like to view the materials beforehand, I'm going to show you how to access the digitized materials that we have. As I do so, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Teresa Deevy and the archive. Teresa Deevy was born on the 21st of January 1894 in Waterford and had 12 siblings. Deevy's father died when she was 3 years old and she was raised by her mother. At a young age, when she was a student at Róisín Convent School in Waterford, she had already begun writing and, in fact, published a piece called "Should Women Have Equal Social and Political Rights?" in her school journal. Deevy was diagnosed with Meniere's disease and was completely deaf by the end of her college studies. She moved to London in 1914, where she became a theatre enthusiast and began to write her own plays, which she submitted to the Abbey. While many of her first plays were not selected, she caught the attention of the Abbey's director, Lennox Robinson. In 1930, Deevy's play, The Reapers, became her first to hit the stage at the Abbey under the direction of Lennox Robinson. This marked a new era in the prolific playwright's career, where success propelled her forward, with many more productions taken center stage at the Abbey. Her plays performed at the Abbey include A Disciple, Temporal Powers, The King of Spain's Daughter, and The Wild Goose. Deevy's best-known play was Katie Roche, which premiered on March 16th of 1936. This play contained a theme important to Deevy and common in her work, the struggles of women in Irish society, telling the story of a passionate young woman trapped in a loveless marriage. Katie Roche became a traveling tour which made its way across the Big Pond to America in 1937. Lennox Robinson said that Deevy was the most important dramatist writing for the Irish theatre. Her success took a sharp turn when the Abbey appointed a new director, Ernest Blythe, who rejected nearly all of her plays, with the exception of her play Light Falling. Deevy thus turned her attention to radio, where, on BBC and Radio Éireann, she had a prolific career for the next 20 years. She wrote many adaptations of her plays for radio, in addition to original works for her radio audience throughout the 40s. In addition to radio, she wrote reviews, articles, and short stories for a number of Irish publications, including Dublin Magazine, Theatre Arts Monthly, The Bell, and Irish Writing. She was critically acclaimed throughout her life, winning many awards, such as the Abbey Theatre's Prize for New Playwright, first prize in the Radio Éireann Drama Competition of 1948, and she was elected to the Irish Academy of Letters in 1954. Teresa Deevy passed away on the 19th of January of 1963, 2 days before her birthday.
We're going to show you some documents from the Graham Archive, with a focus on documents that show how difficult it could be for widows in terms of their financial well-being and how they could be dependent on others for help.
We have a total of 10 letters from Elizabeth Graham to her nephew Thomas Jr. From them, we can gain an insight into how she felt and what occurred after her husband's death. The first letter from Elizabeth to the executor of the will, Thomas Jr., was sent 5 days after her husband died, on the 1st of December 1870. She is upset at the contents of the will, of which she received a copy that day, and says she did not know of its contents beforehand. She says, "I think there is not one of the 4 legatees would wish to see me destitute of a home." She refers to her dead husband as "my dear juiced husband," so is clearly very annoyed. The following letters are about Elizabeth writing to Thomas asking for money. In one letter, of the 10th of January 1871, she says she wants to buy a half ton of potatoes, as she already had to borrow money to buy coal. 2 months later on the 20th of March, she asks for money needed to buy potatoes again, that she intends to plant. Christmas 1870 and Christmas 1871 are both lonely for Elizabeth, with her describing them as being dull and lonesome. In more than one letter, she says that she would like to hear from or be visited by her nephew Thomas, as she is so lonely. She says, however, that it is the will of God and she must resign herself to his holy will. A year after her husband's death, in December 1871, she seems to be getting fed up of the situation and says it is time for her to know by right what is coming to her. On the 8th of March, she wants her nephew to send her money and the IOU as soon as possible. 4 days later, on the 12th of March, she writes Thomas a letter to confirm that she has received his bank order of £16 9 shillings and 8pence, as well as an IOU for £50. There are no more letters from Elizabeth to her nephew after this point, so one wonders if they ever had any contact after this time. It's a shame we do not have his letters to her, as it would be interesting to see the other side of the correspondence, but this is often the way with archives. We will show you how Thomas Graham Sr. changed his wishes through his successive wills before then exploring the letters that his widow Elizabeth sent to their nephew Thomas Graham Jr. The first will we have for Thomas Sr. is from June 1864. £50 are to be given to his widow Elizabeth Graham, which he was to receive 12 months after his death, as well as £5 per year until the lease expired. Interestingly, he also bequeathed Elizabeth all her wearing apparel and any furniture she may have brought into their marriage. The fact that a husband was able to decide whether to allow his wife to continue having possession of her own clothes after his death is quite revealing of the position of women at that time. The second will shows some changes. It was made 6 months later in December 1864. Elizabeth is mentioned as receiving £50, again together with her wearing apparel, yet the previous allowance of £5 a year for the lease payment mentioned in the previous will was dropped. The third will, written in 1866, is very different. Now Elizabeth is mentioned as the last legatee and is to be given a paltry 10 shillings. Luckily for Elizabeth, a fourth will was drafted. It is signed the 20th of November 1870, 5 days before her husband died. The will states that Thomas Graham Sr. is now an inmate of the County of Down Infirmary. His 2 nieces receive sums of money, as does Thomas Graham Jr. The remainder of the property is to be divided equally between London Thomas and Elizabeth, so for the first time Elizabeth is named as receiving a share of physical property rather than only one part of her husband's money.